No one expected the governor to get exposed in less than 30 seconds, but Jasmine Crockett didn't come to play.
It took only seconds, just seconds, for the entire room to realize that Governor Greg Abbott's argument was about to fall apart. The moment he finished speaking, a strange tension rippled through the chamber. Cameras clicked in rapid bursts, capturing every shift in expression. Staffers leaned forward in their chairs, sensing that something big was about to happen. Even the reporters, usually stoic, emotionless observers, lifted their brows, silently bracing for what they knew could become the headline of the day. Because standing across from Greg Abbott was Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. If there is one thing people across the political spectrum agree on, it's that Crockett is not someone you bring half-prepared arguments to. Known for her sharp legal mind, courtroom-like precision, and the ability to dismantle flawed logic faster than anyone else on the floor, she has earned a reputation for leaving her opponents scrambling, speechless, or simply stunned. And on this day, Abbott had brought forward a controversial new bill, one he had been promoting as the solution to what he called the biggest issue facing Texans. His supporters believed this bill would reinforce state power, tighten border control, and reshape enforcement duties. Abbott walked into the chamber with confidence, maybe even a little swagger. He had rehearsed his talking points, memorized his punchlines, and repeated his signature phrase, "This bill will fix everything." But Crockett? She saw through it instantly. From the moment Abbott began outlining the bill, Crockett was reading along, flipping through pages, marking inconsistencies, and mentally calculating the legal consequences hidden between the lines. Unlike many politicians, she didn't rely on emotional rhetoric. She relied on knowledge, on facts, on the precision that comes from years of legal experience. And as Abbott wrapped up his remarks, the room felt the shift. Everyone could sense that the explanation he delivered so confidently wasn't going to survive what was coming next. Crockett cleared her throat gently, a simple sound, but enough to make half the room turn. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't rush, she didn't show any irritation. Instead, she spoke with the calm confidence of someone who doesn't need volume to make an impact. "Governor Abbott," she began, "before we move forward, I have a few concerns, and they come directly from your own bill." That sentence alone made Abbott stiffen slightly. Crockett continued, flipping to a marked page. "You said this bill will reduce conflicts with federal authorities," she said, capping her finger on a specific line. "But this section here actually creates a direct conflict with federal law. In fact, it practically invites a federal lawsuit." The room went silent. Reporters raised their cameras higher. Abbott swallowed. Crockett went on, dissecting the language with the ease of a seasoned attorney. "This part contradicts your earlier statement. This part creates confusion for local enforcement. This section requires funding that isn't accounted for. And this," she paused, turning the bill so the cameras could see the page, "directly undermines the very communities you claim to protect." She wasn't attacking him personally. She was attacking the weaknesses of the bill itself, and doing it in a way that made it impossible for Abbott to deny. Then she delivered one of the lines that would later go viral. Either the bill wasn't fully reviewed, or it was hoped that no one else would review it carefully. Gasps, whispers, the rustling of papers as everyone tried to see what she was referencing. Abbott attempted to defend himself, clearing his throat and saying, "Well, that part requires interpretation." Crockett cut in smoothly, not interrupting, but correcting. "No, Governor, it doesn't require interpretation, it requires rewriting." And the room reacted. Some staffers tried to hide their reactions, some couldn't. Meanwhile, Crockett continued flipping to section after section, exposing contradictions, loopholes, vague language, and provisions that would likely cause more trouble than they solved. Her tone remained steady, her words remained sharp, her analysis remained devastating. What made her takedown so powerful wasn't anger or theatrics, it was clarity. Clarity backed by facts the governor couldn't argue against. By the time she placed the bill back on the table, Abbott's confidence had evaporated. The certainty he walked in with had been replaced by hesitation. He tried to respond again, but every explanation he attempted only made Crockett's point stronger. Crockett ended her remarks with a final, unmistakable blow. Public safety doesn't come from rushed policy. Leadership doesn't come from pushing flawed law. Texans deserve solutions, not shortcuts. Her words echoed in the chamber. Cameras flashed, reporters began typing furiously, staffers exchanged stunned looks. It was over. Abbott's argument, once presented so boldly, had been dismantled in mere minutes. And when the footage hit social media, it spread instantly. Clips of Crockett's takedown were posted, shared, edited, remixed, and discussed everywhere. Her calm, confident dismantling of the bill became the moment people talked about for days. Because what the world saw wasn't just a political disagreement. It was a masterclass in clarity, logic, and accountability. A reminder that in rooms full of power, the sharpest voice isn't always the loudest. Sometimes it's the one armed with the truth.
Governor Abbott entered the chamber confidently, as if the entire room already agreed with him before he even spoke. He held a thick stack of papers in his hand, a new state policy proposal he had been promoting for weeks. Cameras followed him from the moment he walked in. Staffers shuffled behind him carrying binders, charts, and talking points. His allies nodded politely, already preparing to applaud whatever he said. This was Abbott's moment, or at least that's what he believed. He took his position at the front of the room, straightened his jacket, and placed the bill on the podium with a loud, deliberate thump, as if the sound alone would make it look authoritative. The room quieted. The lights dimmed slightly as TV crews adjusted their cameras for a clearer shot. Then Abbott began. This wasn't a casual presentation. He spoke boldly, confidently, pacing back and forth across the chamber. His voice echoed off the walls as he described what he called the strongest policy solution Texas has ever seen. He promised this bill would tighten border control. He promised it would increase state authority. He promised it would protect every Texas family. And every time he made a bold claim, he repeated one of his favorite lines. This is smart policy. This is a breakthrough solution. This is Texas leadership at its finest. He delivered each phrase like a rehearsed performance, emphasizing the words with sweeping gestures. His team behind him nodded vigorously, almost on cue. Chart after chart was displayed on screens. He pointed to statistics, maps, and color-coded diagrams as if the visuals alone would settle the debate. For nearly 20 long minutes, Abbott dominated the stage, projecting confidence, authority, and certainty. His argument was polished, his presentation was sharp, and the way he spoke, you could tell he expected the room to simply accept every word he was saying. He framed the bill as the only logical path forward, stressing that any opposition was rooted in misunderstanding, fear, or political games. But Greg Abbott had missed one important detail. Someone in that chamber had actually read the bill, not just skimmed it, not just memorized the talking points, but studied it. Every paragraph, every clause, every loophole. She knew the wording, she recognized the contradictions, and she saw the hidden consequences. And she was waiting patiently for her turn. That someone was Jasmine Crockett. While Abbott spoke, Crockett wasn't leaning back or losing interest. She was flipping through the pages of the bill, marking sections with sticky notes, highlighting inconsistencies, and quietly whispering sections of the text to herself. Her eyes moved fast, sharp, focused, analytical. Every so often, she would pause on a sentence, tilt her head, and underline something with careful precision. Her expression wasn't angry, it wasn't emotional. It was the face of someone who had already spotted the weaknesses long before the speech ended. When Abbott finally wrapped up his presentation, the room filled with polite applause. TV cameras zoomed in on him as he nodded with satisfaction, clearly believing he had delivered a flawless argument. But the moment Abbott stepped back, attention shifted. The applause died down, chairs creaked as people turned. A few staffers whispered, and in the middle of the chamber, Jasmine Crockett slowly closed the thick binder containing the bill. Her turn. She didn't adjust her microphone dramatically. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't attack Abbott personally or show irritation. Instead, she opened the bill again, deliberately, almost gently, flipped to a specific page she had already marked, and lifted her eyes toward Abbott. "Governor Abbott," she began calmly, "I just have one question." Instantly, the atmosphere in the chamber changed. Television cameras that had been pointed at Abbott pivoted toward Crockett. Reporters lifted their pens. Staffers leaned in, some already sensing that something significant was about to happen. The room's energy shifted from polite engagement to intense anticipation. Abbott slowly turned toward her. The expression on his face suggested that he expected a simple clarification or maybe even a friendly question. But Crockett's tone was different, measured, steady, dangerously calm. She tapped the page with her finger, the quiet sound echoing louder than Abbott's entire 20-minute speech. The room went silent. Not just quiet, silent. The kind of silence that precedes impact. The kind of silence where everyone holds their breath. The kind of silence where people already know something is about to collapse. Because when Jasmine Crockett says she has one question, it rarely ends with just one, and it never ends the way her opponent hopes. Abbott straightened his jacket again, suddenly far less confident than before. He tried to smile, but even that looked uneasy. And Crockett, without raising her voice, without rushing a single word, prepared to dismantle the most important bill Abbott had presented in months. All she needed was that one question, that one section, that one moment. And every person in the chamber knew the real debate was about to begin.
Crockett lifted the bill in her hands, raising it just high enough for the cameras to catch the page number. The paper rustled sharply in the quiet chamber, a sound that somehow carried more weight than Abbott's entire presentation. She didn't rush, she didn't posture. She simply pointed at a sentence Abbott himself had referenced earlier. "Right here," she said, her voice calm but unmistakably firm. "You claim this bill will increase state efficiency and reduce federal conflict. But this section," she tapped the line with her finger, "literally creates a direct conflict with federal law." The words hit the room like a sudden crack of thunder. Abbott shifted, trying to maintain his posture, but the discomfort was visible. His jaw tightened. His eyes dropped to the page as if he suddenly needed to verify what was written. It was a small movement, but in a room full of reporters hungry for reactions, it was glaring. Cameras immediately clicked in Word. Reporters leaned forward, raising their phones to capture what felt like the first spark of a political explosion. Crockett continued, her tone steady, almost surgical. "You're proposing a solution," she said, "that contradicts your own explanation. Not only does it not solve the issue, it actually opens the door for lawsuits, federal pushback, and unnecessary chaos for Texans." She paused, allowing the words to settle. You could feel the weight of her argument pressing down on every person in the room. Crockett didn't need volume, she had clarity. And in political hearings, clarity is far more dangerous. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't emotionally charged. She wasn't attacking him as a person. She was doing exactly what made her so formidable, dissecting a flawed argument with precision. Abbott tried to respond. He cleared his throat, straightened his papers, and took a small step forward, as if movement alone could steady his position. "Well, Congresswoman, that section needs interpretation." But he didn't get far. Crockett flipped the bill again, this time with purpose, with confidence, with the smoothness of someone who had already mapped every weakness between its pages. She held up another section and spoke over him, not rudely, but firmly, like an attorney presenting undeniable evidence. "And right here," she continued, "you claim this bill protects local communities. But this section," she pointed again, "gives the state the authority to override local law enforcement decisions." She tilted her head slightly, looking directly at Abbott. "So how does taking power away from local communities protect those same communities?" The question was simple, but the impact was devastating. In the back of the chamber, a few staffers exchanged quick glances, those tiny, involuntary looks people share when they realize something has gone terribly wrong. A legislative aide lowered his head into his notebook. Another whispered to a colleague. The tension in the room thickened. Abbott hesitated, just for a moment, but it was long enough for everyone to see he didn't have a ready answer. Crockett pressed forward. Her voice did not rise, her expression didn't harden. She simply laid bare the truth that no one else had dared to say aloud. "Either you didn't read your own bill carefully," she said, letting the words hang in the air, "or you hoped no one else would." It was sharp, it was direct, and it was completely controlled. The room reacted instantly. Gasps bounced from row to row. A few people froze, unsure whether they had heard her correctly. Others whispered under their breath, stunned at the bluntness of her statement. Even members of Abbott's own team shifted uncomfortably, their poker faces beginning to crack. In political chambers, moments like this don't just happen, they explode. And this one exploded with the force of a viral moment waiting to be clipped and shared. Cameras zoomed in on Abbott's face, catching the flicker of frustration and uncertainty he couldn't hide. His mouth opened slightly. He looked like he wanted to respond but couldn't find the words. Meanwhile, Crockett simply lowered the bill onto the desk in front of her. She wasn't looking for applause. She wasn't grandstanding. She was stating facts, facts that exposed the shaky foundation of the entire proposal. The silence that followed was louder than any argument. Social media didn't wait. Reporters in the room were already typing frantic notes, sending push alerts, and posting initial reactions. Phones buzzed, laptops clacked, and even before the hearing ended, clips of Crockett's takedown were already circulating. Within hours, that one line, "Either you didn't read your own bill or you hoped no one else would," was everywhere. It appeared in headlines, it trended on Twitter. It was remixed, subtitled, clipped, slowed down, and shared across every major platform. Comment sections erupted with reactions. Fire. She ended the entire argument in seconds. Abbott was not ready for her. Crockett is on a different level. But inside the chamber, none of that had happened yet. All that existed in that moment was one woman, one bill, and one undeniable truth shining through the noise. Jasmine Crockett had done what she does best: expose the weakness no one else was brave enough or prepared enough. And Abbott? He stood there, holding a bill that no longer looked like the solution he had claimed it to be.
Greg Abbott tried one last time, one desperate attempt to pull his argument back from the edge. You could almost see it in his eyes, the realization that the ground beneath him was crumbling faster than he expected. He cleared his throat, stiffened his shoulders, and tried to recover his confidence. "Well," he said slowly, "that part needs interpretation." But Jasmine Crockett didn't let the momentum slip away. She didn't interrupt him out of anger. She didn't raise her voice. She simply cut in with precision. "No, Governor," she said firmly, "it doesn't need interpretation. It needs rewriting." The way she said it sent a quiet shockwave through the room. She stepped forward, calm, controlled, unshaken, holding the printed bill with both hands. The paper fluttered slightly as she walked, as if the bill itself already knew what was about to happen. Crockett placed it gently on the table in front of Abbott, almost like she was laying out evidence in a courtroom. Then she delivered the knockout blow.
Policy that endangers communities, contradicts federal law, and undermines local leadership isn't strong Texas leadership. It's rushed, it's sloppy, and it's not something the people of Texas deserve. Boom! The sound wasn't literal, but the impact was. That was the moment. The precise second the energy shifted, permanently and unmistakably. A few people in the chamber blinked hard, as if trying to process what they just heard. Others froze mid-note, their pens hovering in the air. Even some of Abbott's own allies stopped nodding and stared forward like statues. It wasn't just a sentence. It was the line that would replay on every social media feed in the country. That was the clip that went viral. That was the moment Abbott's argument collapsed. Because Crockett didn't simply say the bill was flawed, she demonstrated it, piece by piece, like an attorney presenting an airtight closing argument. She explained, patiently and clearly, how the bill created legal contradictions that invited immediate federal lawsuits, funding gaps that left local agencies without the money to enforce anything, community risks that put small towns in danger, enforcement confusion that would leave officers unsure of who had authority. And she didn't explain any of these problems in complicated legal jargon. She broke them down so simply, so clearly, that every person watching, experts, regular citizens, students, seniors, everyone, understood exactly why the bill was a mess. That was part of Crockett's strength. She didn't just win arguments, she made the audience feel the truth. The camera zoomed in on Abbott, catching every flicker of discomfort as he realized he had no effective response. His usual talking points weren't landing. His practice lines weren't working. His confident stance had softened into uncertainty. He blinked, he swallowed, he looked down, just for a moment, but the cameras caught it. Behind him, his staffers shifted nervously. Across the chamber, reporters whispered to each other, their voices low but urgent. You could hear faint typing as some drafted the breaking story in real time. A couple of journalists leaned toward each other, whispering the same thought. She just destroyed the bill. One reporter in the front row didn't even bother whispering. She just exhaled and said under her breath, "Oh, wow." Another journalist typed out the headline that would soon spread across news feeds nationwide. Jasmine Crockett dismantles Abbott's argument in seconds. And for once, no one argued with it. Even people who didn't follow politics regularly felt something shift. Because this wasn't about party. It wasn't about team. It wasn't even about the policy itself. It was about clarity. It was about truth cutting through confusion. It was about being prepared, more prepared than the person who brought the bill forward. As Crockett stepped back from the table, she didn't smile triumphantly. She didn't gloat. She didn't gesture for applause. She simply returned to her seat with the quiet confidence of someone who knew she had done exactly what needed to be done. Nothing more, nothing less. Meanwhile, Abbott stood frozen for a moment, like a man realizing the storm he thought he'd brought under control had just been redirected straight at him. His staff whispered behind him, offering weak suggestions he didn't fully hear. His notes, once neatly arranged, now felt meaningless. Crockett had done what few politicians could do. She exposed the weaknesses of the bill so clearly that there was no room for spin, no angle for escape, no phrasing that could undo what everyone in the room had just witnessed. By the time the hearing ended, the clip had already begun circulating online. People replayed it, shared it, commented on it. The moment spread from Twitter to Instagram to YouTube in minutes. Some called it a masterclass. Others called it a teaching moment. Many simply called it the shutdown of the year. But one thing was undeniable. Jasmine Crockett didn't just challenge the bill. She obliterated its foundation in front of the entire nation. And Greg Abbott, for all his preparation, never saw it coming.
After the hearing ended, Jasmine Crockett didn't rush, didn't boast, and didn't look rattled by the intensity of what had just happened. She stepped out of the chamber with the same calm confidence she carried inside, But now, the hallway was overflowing with journalists, staffers, and cameras practically chasing her for a reaction. Microphones shot forward, recorders clicked on, reporters crowded around her, eager to know how she had dissected the governor's proposal with such speed and precision. One reporter finally managed to get close enough to ask, "How did you catch so many contradictions so fast?" Crockett paused for a moment, offering a polite, almost amused smile. "I read the bill," she replied simply, "and I care enough about Texans to make sure someone holds powerful people accountable." And that was the perfect summary of what had just happened in the room behind her. She didn't rely on theatrics, she didn't rely on emotion, she relied on knowledge and the accountability that comes from actually understanding the laws that impact people's lives. Within minutes, clips of her exchange with Governor Abbott hit social media. But within hours, those clips weren't just trending, they were everywhere. Tens of thousands of shares, millions of views, thousands of comments piling in every minute. The internet had erupted around one moment, the moment Jasmine Crockett exposed every flaw, inconsistency, and contradiction buried in the governor's proposal. For many viewers, it wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. Clear, calm, sharp, no yelling, no disrespect, no confusion. Just a precise dismantling of a bill that, in her words, was rushed, sloppy, and dangerous. On Twitter, people praised her ability to break complex legislative language into simple, digestible points that even someone unfamiliar with policy could understand instantly. On TikTok, users edited the clip into reaction videos, highlighting the moment she said, "No, Governor, it needs rewriting." On Facebook, community groups shared her responses with captions like, "Finally, someone who actually reads the bills." Even policy experts commented publicly about how her arguments were not just powerful, but technically accurate. And then something unexpected began happening. Some of Abbott's own supporters, people who rarely, if ever, agree with Crockett, started admitting online that the bill might not survive as originally written. A few conservative analysts even acknowledged that Crockett exposed legitimate legal conflicts that would almost certainly lead to federal challenges. By the following morning, talk shows across the country featured the clip. Political analysts replayed the exchange, frame by frame, pointing out the exact moment Abbott realized he couldn't defend the bill's contradictions. Commentators noted how unusual it was to see such a decisive, one-sided takedown in a public hearing. Headlines popped up on major networks. Jasmine Crockett dismantles Abbott's argument in seconds. Crockett leaves governor scrambling after exposing bill flaws. Texans applaud Crockett for calling out risks in Abbott proposal. Some described it as a masterclass in legislative analysis. Others simply called it a shutdown. But in Austin, the effects were even more immediate. Behind closed doors, lawmakers who originally planned to back the bill began questioning its durability. Staffers fielded calls from constituents asking why the governor's office hadn't anticipated the problems Crockett raised. Legal advisors were asked to re-examine the bill line by line to determine whether it could survive a federal challenge. By midweek, whispers began circulating in the Capitol. The bill might undergo major changes. Entire sections could be rewritten. Some portions might even be removed entirely. And it all traced back to one moment. Not a shouting match, not a personal attack, not a dramatic confrontation, but a few seconds of pure, undeniable clarity delivered by Jasmine Crockett. It was the kind of moment that defines political careers, not because it humiliates someone else, but because it reveals something rare. A leader who understands the assignment, does the homework, and refuses to let flawed policy slip through without a fight. She didn't just point out a contradiction, she mapped out the consequences. She explained how the bill created legal contradictions that would trigger immediate federal pushback, funding gaps that left enforcement agencies vulnerable, community risks that could destabilize local safety efforts, enforcement confusion that would leave officers unsure who had authority. She laid out a clearer argument in 2 minutes than many lawmakers manage in an entire session.
That's why the moment exploded online. It wasn't gotcha politics. It was competence. It was clarity. It was courage. As Crockett walked to her car that evening, she wasn't thinking about the viral clip or the headlines. She was thinking about Texans, the communities that would feel the consequences of this bill if the flaws she exposed went unaddressed. And that's what resonated with people. Because in a political world where many leaders speak in vague generalities, Crockett spoke with specifics. Where others dodge questions, she confronted them head on. Where others try to spin reality, she grounded her arguments in facts. Her message was unmistakable. If a bill is weak, if it's sloppy, if it's dangerous, she will call it out. And that moment proved one thing very clearly. When Jasmine Crockett steps into the room, arguments built on weak foundations don't survive.